and weakness revealed, but I will be healed in the fire. The joy of the Lord is my strength, my strength. The joy of the Lord is my strength, my strength. The joy of the Lord is my strength, my strength. Oh, the joy of the Lord is my strength. The joy of the Lord is my strength, my strength. The joy of the Lord is my strength, my strength. Oh, the joy of the Lord is my strength, my strength. The joy of the Lord is my strength. I have a river of life pouring out of me. I have a river of life flowing out of me. I have a river of life flowing out of me. I have a river of life flowing out of Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. I am tired, I am weak, I am worn. Through the storm, through the night, lead me on, of our monuments, an ancient light appearing into every deadly plot we've laid, into all our bitterness and hate, a kindness ever nearing. Over every war we've ever waged, over every prophet we have slain, a peace past understanding, out of all our chosen miseries, out of all our misplaced loyalties, a heaven in the making. Eden's gates swing open to us now. We'll turn every weapon to a plow, for every sin pardon, every field of wildflowers left to seed, every forest filling up with green. There's healing in the garden, healing in the garden, healing
Will the bracket kids be joining us for prayer? Okay, come on over.
Jenny,
Come on over.
Jenny.
Just a moment, y'all. We'll be led in prayer today by the bracket kids.
Sorry. Jenny, come here. Do you want to come sit with
Here,
us
Wesley,
for
you
prayer?
sit on me. Yeah.
Come here,
Here
come
we
sit.
go.
Okay,
Okay.
maybe not.
Here we go.
Okay, you ready? For prayer today, we're going to sing This Little Light of Mine, okay?
Ready?
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine.
this little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. Good. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Hide it under a bushel.
No!
I'm gonna let it shine.
Oh,
Hide it under a bushel.
No!
I'm gonna let it shine. Hide it under a bushel.
No!
I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Nice job, Wesley. Amen.
Amen. Hi, everybody. My name is Jen Colburn. I am joining you remotely from an Amtrak journey. So very cool. This is a way we can all stay connected, in today's world. So super cool. I'm heading towards Chicago. We're coming back. So very, very cool. The kids did awesome. Wesley's backup vocal was clutch. So anyway, I want to welcome you all this morning. I hope this is a moment of respite for you and maybe like a chaotic time of life, a season of life. I know I'm definitely feeling that, whether it's, just dealing with life going on in the midst of it, and, or childcare or juggling needs like that. I hope this is, a peaceful hour for you. And thanks for joining us this morning. So,
I'm afraid we may have lost Jen, and so we will. I'll jump in and just say briefly, thanks again for joining us. And we started this church to. Oh. Let me try to.
if you
There we go. Okay, we started this church to help people find spiritual health and connect with God. And so if you're newer with us, you'll see that we are both an online community and an in-person community. This week, we are online only. And so we're grateful for everybody who's able to join us from afar, even those that are live and reporting from Amtrak trains. And so wherever it is you're joining from, if you would like to tell us where you're joining from, you can use the live chat that is already happening. Thanks for the nice messages for Ezra and Wesley for the singing. So that's great. Appreciate those. But yeah, you can use the live chat to tell us where you're joining from. Our moderator today, hanging out in the chat, is Ed Wang. So thanks, Ed, for doing that. And yeah, I get the privilege of leading our reflection for today. If I've not met you before, my name is Vince. I'm one of the pastors here, and I'm looking forward to getting to share with us this morning on the final Sunday of January. My reflection for us today, rather than a discussion this morning, is I just want to comment briefly on some things I've learned lately about a famous Jesus teaching from the Sermon on the Mount, "Turn the Other Cheek," which no doubt you've heard that phrase before. It's pretty ingrained in popular culture. But there is more under the surface of that phrase than many people might realize. So I'm going to be drawn from a couple of sources today that if you're curious of reading more, you can find out about. One source I'm going to be reading from is a guy named Walter Wink, who was a white American progressive biblical scholar and activist. He died in 2012, but wrote pretty prolifically for many years. And he's very important to the story of LGBTQ inclusion in churches. So perhaps that's something that's really important to you. This would be somebody who you could look back and see in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, somebody who was speaking before things were popular to be said. And then second, I'm going to be drawing from a theologian named Andrew Sung Park, who is a Korean-American theologian, particular in the world of liberation theology and open and relational theology. virtues, two things that we talk about a fair amount here. And this, Mr. Park is still writing, and his thoughts we're going to be returning to actually in the coming months for other messages at Brownline. But I want to read the teaching that you all may be familiar with, or maybe we have to refresh our minds from Jesus, and then we'll unpack it according to these two awesome thinkers, Walter Wink and Andrew Sung Park. So the passage goes like this, if you'll remember. It says, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you," this is Jesus talking, "do not set yourself against an evildoer. But if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your coat, give your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go also the 2nd mile." That is Jesus' teaching in the Sermon on the Mount, recorded in Matthew chapter 5. Now, the thing that Jesus is directing us away from is, of course, retribution, retaliation, cycles of revenge, because of course those will never end, right? The saying that we've all heard many times, an eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind, right? Like, that feels deeply true. This kills our whole souls when we demand for the killing of others' souls. And this is like a higher calling that seizes a lot of people, right? Like, it grabs us, and yet it's really hard. How do we, in the face of evil, in the face of grief, in the face of feeling hurt, injustice, how do we not become just like our enemies? How many movies and TV shows or stories situate us in this space that Jesus talks about? I, as a Marvel Cinematic Universe nerd, recently watched the big Spider-Man movie, and it totally did this really well. Situates in that place of how do you not become just like your enemy when you are so full of grief or anger or righteous anger at injustice. How do you not become just like your enemy? So that's awesome. I think that's really great. What I really want to focus on, though, is what is the alternative thing Jesus is encouraging from retaliation with these 3 examples he gives. Turn the other cheek. Let somebody take your cloak also. Go the extra mile. These familiar phrases, right? They're ingrained in our popular culture. Usually they're understood to be something like kill them with kindness. I wonder if anyone's heard that kind of phrase, right? It's just not always a bad phrase. That's good. But I think when faced with true evil or injustice, kill them with kindness can feel like it falls a little bit short. Like it's just kind of encouraging people who are victims to become better victims. And I wonder if you've ever felt that. I wonder if you'd be like, yeah, but to this teaching. Well, according to this one writer that I mentioned earlier, Walter Wink, this is where learning a bit of context about the first century Jewish customs and norms that Jesus is speaking into help us to see that more was being said here. So to set the stage, what I want us to imagine is when Jesus was speaking those words, this is the Sermon on the Mount. So Jesus is addressing the masses in this town called Galilee. And the masses are Jewish people, because this is a town where the Jewish diaspora live, and they are largely oppressed people. They are under the rule of Romans, and so there's lots of occupying Romans there. They don't necessarily live there, but there's soldiers and officials there who have all of the power. And then there are also some fellow Jews who are more powerful than them and more privileged than them because they're, in some way, they've made agreements with the Romans. So they might be complicit with some of the injustice that the Roman Empire is doing, or they might just be trying to, pay off something. And so they've become a tax collector for the Romans. And they're actually a Jewish person, but there's a lot of animosity between the Jewish masses and these Jewish people with more privilege. And so Jesus is talking to those oppressed group. He's gathered a bunch of people around him. People are following him and listening to him. And Jesus says these 3 things. And so let me unpack one at a time because there's a lot going on here. So first, turn the other cheek. Now, the fact that we begin turn the other cheek, this encouragement from Jesus, with what is said to be a slap on the right cheek, is actually of utmost importance here. Because a slap on the right cheek, if you're facing me, a slap on the right cheek might mean a backhand with the right hand, if you were to slap me, Or it might mean a slap with the left hand if you were facing me with a slap. And either of those, a backhand with the right hand or a left-handed slap with the front of the hand, would be a sharp insult in Jewish custom. And actually, we still have some of this in our culture today. A backhanded slap. Backhand is not really about injury. It's about insult, right? We're familiar with that. And then in this culture, because the left hand was considered unclean as it was used to clean yourself after relieving yourself, a left-handed slap with any, the back or the front, would have been considered an insult. And so in power dynamics, the slap was used for humiliation. A slaveholder might slap a slave. A husband might slap a wife. A parent might slap their child. A Roman might slap a Jew. However, as the custom went, if a superior struck an inferior with the flat side of the right hand on the left cheek, so that we haven't talked about that one. You've talked about backhand on the right cheek or a left-handed slap on the right cheek. But if you took your right hand, the clean hand in that culture, and just tapped on the left side, that meant an end of humiliation. And we still sort of have this custom in our contemporary culture. The way I can imagine it is like a scene from The Godfather or The Sopranos, where like the patriarch of the family, is just chewed out the nephew who's just kind of going wild. And then they say to them, I think the message has been received. And they gently take the right hand and say, we're good, you go. And for some reason, I just imagine Italian mob bosses when I do that. But that's my imagination to try to there's still some presence of these kind of customs and norms in our own culture. It's still condescending, the slap, right? But it communicates, okay, the humiliation is over. Right hand, front of the right hand on the left cheek. That's the end. So in light of this, I wonder if you can see where Jesus is going. Jesus telling the inferiors in his society, when they are slapped on the right cheek, okay, it's going to be an insult. If you're slapped on the right cheek, it's either a backhand from the right or a left. If you are insulted, what Jesus says is turn the left cheek to be slapped as well. And that is not a passive surrender. In the words of Andrew Sung Park, it is a demand for the end of dehumanization. It's actually an insistence on equality. I'm not waiting for you as the supposedly powerful person to end this story. I am saying I demand that you end this. I demand for equality. I'm demanding that as the inferior person. I'm not going to let you set the terms. This interpretation of turn the other cheek is as resistance. And it's actually more consistent with the fuller picture of Jesus' ministry. There's actually an instance in Jesus' ministry recorded in John chapter 18 where Jesus is struck and he doesn't passively turn the other cheek. He's struck by a policeman, and he says, if I have spoken wrongly, testify to the wrong. But if I have spoken rightly, why do you strike me? So there we are. Jesus showing us that what he's actually about here is resistance, and not just passively surrendering and turn the other cheek. There is more going on with this phrase. And the other two, this take your cloak also, or go the extra mile, also have some really interesting things going on beneath the surface. So, take your cloak also. When somebody has sued you for your coat, give them your cloak as well. This refers to a common Jewish practice of a creditor who would pawn a debtor's garment as a pledge. Oh, you're making a promise to me as somebody who I've loaned money? Okay, well, I'm going to pawn a garment, or I'm going to pawn something that you own. Not unlike collateral in our economy today. But Jesus' reference to this is a predatory version of this practice, because it says the creditor is suing the debtor for their garment. Think about that. A rich person suing a poor person. That's predatory. That's the definition of predatory, right? So the next thing we need to do is distinguish between a coat and a cloak. Now, we use the word coat today to refer to the thing that we put on after everything else. A coat in first century Palestine is actually considered an undergarment. And then the cloak is the outer garment. That's the thing that you put on afterwards to stay warm. And this is important because in the Jewish law, in Moses' law, which is very concerned with the plight of the poor, it prohibits a creditor from pawning a debtor's outer garment, their cloak, overnight. Because if you did that, the owner of that blanket might be poor and might need it as a blanket. There is reference to this in the book of Exodus. There is reference to this in the book of Deuteronomy. Multiple references that say, you cannot take a cloak from a poor person if you are a creditor. If you do that, you are going against the Jewish law. But this law does not apply to the undergarment or the coat. So a predator, like a predatory creditor, can still go after a coat and stay within the Jewish law. And so what I imagine here in a parallel to today is like rich corporations finding loopholes so they don't have to pay taxes. This is a powerful person who wants to get what they want, and they decide, oh, okay, well, I can't take somebody's cloak because that would make me a bad Jewish person. So instead, I'm just going to sue you for your coat. Andrew Sung Park talks about it this way, the brilliant response from Jesus. He says this: in response to such a calculated demand, Jesus teaches the defender to give away both the undergarment and the outer garment. This means parading out of the court completely naked. Taboo in Israel. Taboo today, right? However, the shame of nakedness in this case would not fall on the person without clothing, but on the one who caused the person to go naked. This act of disrobing would unmask the cruelty and the creditor and the entire system that oppresses the poor debtor. Walter Wink describes it this way. He says this is a courageous move on the part of a poor person. Sort of like saying, you want my robe? Here, take everything. Now you've got everything except my body. Is that what you'll take next? And I can just imagine these sorts of words being used in protest today. You have everything. Do you want my body? Is that what you'll take next? What a brilliant, courageous encouragement that I think Jesus is driving at. And finally, one last, because I just think it's powerful to see all three. Go the extra mile. While we just talked about let them take your cloak, which is a way for an oppressed Jew to respond to a Jewish person who was oppressing them. They were subject to the law of Moses for their reputation. Go the extra mile seems to be a situation where Jesus is encouraging oppressed Jews to respond to an oppressive Roman. An oppressive Roman wouldn't care about the Jewish law. That doesn't matter to their reputation. But what does matter is Roman law. The empire, what do they say? And so what we learn about the context here from Mr. Wink is that Roman soldiers occupying a space like Galilee had the legal right to impose forced labor on their subjected peoples. So they could say, here, carry my bags 1 mile to the next town. I need you to do that for me. And a subjected person like a Jew would have to comply. However, to do this, soldiers did need permits from their ruling officers. And permits, just like today in our government, are cumbersome to get. So evidently this right was abused all the time. Soldiers would demand that somebody would carry their bags without a permit and just taking advantage of their position. Wink suggests that Jesus' idea to say to his folks, carry a soldier's bag a 2nd mile, is a provocation. It's like begging the question that puts the abusive soldier in an uncomfortable position, you know? Like suddenly we're asking questions like, what is this civilian doing going an extra mile with the soldier's bag? Is the civilian insulting the soldier's strength? Is trying to get the soldier disciplined? Will the civilian file a complaint? This could lead to an uncomfortable position where the Roman soldier has to awkwardly plead with somebody who is supposedly their lesser to return their baggage. A total flip of the power dynamic. Once again, Jesus encouraging a resistance that is not just surrender. It's not just let somebody take advantage of you, but it is something that is meant to expose power dynamics and people taking advantage of other people. So I want to try to fully translate this to like, how does this affect our lives? Because I think there's a lot being said here if we're being encouraged to resist while not retaliating. A pastor that I read once suggests a framework for trying to live by higher values and like refusing to retaliate. How do we not go with an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth? Jesus encourages lots of these things. So what's the framework that we can kind of use to understand? And so the framework is this. It's 3 tiers. First, there's exploitative. Then there's ethical. and then there is redemptive. And the idea is that, unfortunately, there are many in the world who operate on the exploitative level. And often those people have power. They exploit others because they can. And maybe power even, does that to us. We become drunk with power and we exploit people. Now, the next stage is ethical, the next step up. And fortunately, this pastor argues that actually most of the world, we think, operates in an ethical way. And that's wonderful. That we should feel thankful that most of the world is not exploitative. Great. But there is a third way that this pastor argues that is redemptive. And the idea here would be Jesus' call is redemptive. It is beyond just ethical. So what I want to suggest is that obviously there's exploitative retaliation out there, right? Like when the powerful operate with eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, we see that and it's terrible and we all want to call it out. And so I kind of want to set that aside for a second as something we obviously all must oppose. But I wonder if in the age of the internet, there's also a version of retaliation that we sort of passively accept because it's not exploitative and it's arguably ethical. In the age of the internet, we can refuse to retaliate physically, which is great, but we have such an available avenue to go after some of the thrill that retaliation gives us online. Because covered by the internet's anonymity, we can resort to shame, insult, cruelty, feeding the revenge monster, justifying our hurting of another because we were hurt, and usually with very little consequence or feedback. This kind of retaliation is definitely not wielding oppressive force. It is definitely not turning to violence, and that's a really important distinction. But it is perhaps what Jesus addresses elsewhere in the Sermon on the Mount, when he says, "You have heard it said that murder opens you up to judgment. I say anger and insult open you up to judgment." In our culture, this sort of retaliation, I think, is an acceptable way to blow off steam, so long as you're not inciting exploitative retaliation. And that's true. Actually, in a lot of ways, I agree. I think you can make an ethical argument about that. I don't think this is bad. I think we all do need to blow off steam, and we do need to find the right places where we can totally, fully dump out how we're really feeling without censor. I think we need to find those things. But I'm drawn to this idea that in the public square, when we're not just with our inner circle, I'm drawn to this idea that there's something beyond merely ethical behavior that Jesus urges us toward. Beyond just being ethical, maybe there is something about being redemptive, and that is a greater call. I wonder if Jesus' turn the other cheek words, when understood as resistance, are a model for being redemptive. They're a model for threading the needle that feels so hard to right now in America post-Trump. How do we thread the needle, resist but not retaliate? Or it's the way to thread the needle in just like that universally hard thing for all of us in our personal lives, but particularly when it comes to societal injustice. How do we resist but not retaliate? Or if we're privileged, how do we resist in solidarity with those who are oppressed but not retaliate? How do we respond to injustice in an active way but not become like the thing we are opposing in the process? It is so hard, but I think that these three examples for Jesus are great because it's almost like Jesus is saying there are ways. There are ways to do it. This is really hard. It's not going to be obvious. It's not going to be the immediate thing that your mind jumps to. But if you catch my drift, he's implicitly speaking to his crowd. Do you catch my drift? You can turn the other cheek. Demand equality. They're going to take your coat? Make them take your cloak also. Put them in the position of shame rather than you. They're going to make you walk a mile? Walk the extra mile. Put them in the uncomfortable position. It's time for them to have that experience, not just you. Andrew Sung Park, our theologian we're reading from, as a minoritized person himself in America, he puts it these ways. Here are some examples. You can assert your dignity. You can refuse to accept the inferior position. You can expose the injustice in the system. You can meet force with cleverness or humor. You can break the cycle of humiliation. You can deprive the oppressor of a situation where a show of force is effective. You can be willing to accept the penalty of breaking unjust norms or laws. All of these are active resistance, and none of them are retaliation. This is threading the needle. These examples. Let me rephrase Park's suggestions for the privileged person who's seeking to resist in solidarity with the oppressed. You can assert the dignity of a person or people that a family member or coworker has defamed. You can refuse to treat someone as though they are in an inferior position. You can amplify voices that expose injustice in our systems. You can call out force if you see a fellow privileged person wield it. You can refuse to humiliate other people, even when privilege or power have nothing to do with the situation. You can simply show, I am not okay with humiliation as a weapon. I will never be okay with that. You can stand in the way if an oppressor attempts to show force to an oppressed person. And you can be willing also to accept the penalty of breaking unjust norms or law, rather than just throwing money at a problem or taking advantage of the benefit of the way you look or the way you talk. All of these are, again, active resistance, and none of them are retaliation. They thread that needle of turning the other cheek that Jesus talks about. So, I want to close by saying one last thing after kind of marinating in familiar phrases that maybe we don't often read with such a bite, but they have a bite to them. I want to close by saying that this is calling you to higher values, as we often see when we read things like Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. There are many things that we might talk about at church that are calling us to higher values. Many things you might talk about in many of the communities that you're in, the communities that you're a part of, the justice things that you are oriented toward, that call you to higher values. And they are hard, right? That's by definition, they're hard. None of us, you, anyone you know, the greatest person you know, the most intentional person you know, cannot pull these things off by conviction and willpower. Personally, I default to just letting people walk all over me usually. Maybe you're like me. Maybe you default to that. Or maybe you default to the other side of this higher value. You fight fire with fire. We all kind of default to one side of these sorts of higher values or another. It's really hard to thread the needle the way that we all want to. So my encouragement is, do not tie your worthiness as a human being to whether or not you can live up to such a conviction or a higher calling like this. It is so good to be grabbed by higher callings, but you cannot tie your worthiness as a human being to whether you live them out. You are all awesome people, but eventually, even the best of us will run out of gas or inevitably make a mistake or have regrets. So do not tie your worthiness to this. And yet, we can still look to them. We can let them call us out to the next thing in our story. We can let them call us to the behaviors that we want to be known by and not tie our worthiness to them. I've spent so much time, I think, believing my values, and when I don't or when I struggle, I must be a bad person. But Jesus is brilliant, not just on these, like, how do you resist but not retaliate front. Jesus is also brilliant on the how do you call yourself to higher values but not hate yourself. That is also Jesus's brilliance. And so for me personally, I have to come back to some sort of spiritual element in my life. If I do not do that, I am inevitably going to be the only thing that can decide who I am or what I'm made of is whether or not I live up to my values. But if there is something more to that, if there is a piece of God that lives inside me and lives inside every single human being in the world, we are valuable in and of ourselves. Should we strive to try to live out those higher values? Absolutely. And we do so by returning to that source that gives us our worth. We are lovable. We are lovable because we are made in the image of God, not because we are perfect. Not because every time we feel inspired or convicted by some good idea or justice cause, we live up to it perfectly. The only way that we can do that is by really, truly being held in a place to say, like, I am lovable. I can be refueled when I'm out of gas because there is a God that hasn't turned me away. I can go to my community even when I feel regret because they also will love me even so. I wonder how far or how close each of us might feel to being in such a place this morning. I do think that that is the rub. That is where the rubber meets the road. For this higher calling from Jesus or any other, do we feel truly lovable in the spaces we're in? If not, how can we surround ourselves with more of a community that can show us that? How can we shift our belief so that we are looking to a God of love and not a God of judgment? That is where we experience success in these sorts of things or not. So let me pray along those lines for us this morning as I close up this weekend's reflection. Well, God, this morning I thank you for these words from Matthew chapter 5 and how brilliant they are when we can unpack them. And for any of us who just like on a head level just feel excited when we encounter a new interpretation of something or like realize the brilliance of something and that just like activates us. I pray that that would happen for us and we would feel activated, we'd feel excited, we'd feel filled up by that experience. That would be really good. But then in the ways that whatever it is that we're focused on, whether it's this passage or whether we're grateful for something else. Somebody else said, it wasn't Vince, but it was like, it was somebody at work, or it was somebody I follow on Instagram, or it was somebody else during this week that was just, oh man, they said that thing and it really felt true. And I was just drawn into like deeper convictions and I wanted to be a good person. But so often then the balloon pops because we had a bad day. Or the balloon pops because we didn't sleep well. And the next day we're just too exhausted. And that conviction that we felt so high on the day before is just gone now. Are we bad people when that happens? God, speak to us. Show us that we are not. Speak to us in the places that are just feel so torn because we long to live by higher values. But everything about our culture screams at us that if we don't do it, we're phonies, we're frauds. And then we feel like we have to prove ourselves by like posting the right thing on Facebook or something. It's just madness. Why do we do this to ourselves? Why do we do this to ourselves? I pray for an experience of love for each of us now. I pray that we would feel loved by you, God, and that you would call to mind now for each of us the people in our lives who truly love us, who will show us that refueling, rejuvenating, healing love that we so desperately need to live up to our higher values. We will all experience regret. None of us will do this perfectly. But we all can also find what we need. Because we don't live in a world of scarcity when it comes to relationship and love. There is enough to go around. I pray as we enter into another week, no doubt we will feel another round of, convicted by this or that thing, or charged by this or that idea, or called by this or that higher value, whether it's, turn the other cheek, resist but don't retaliate, or something else. No doubt we'll feel it again. I pray that we would feel able to draw to mind quickly, God, how you truly operate, that you are a God of love that encourages us and fills us up to follow those higher callings when they come across us, and that accepts us when we are unable to do so, that refuels us when we are unable to do so, and dusts us off so that we can return. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, and I'm wondering if our on location MC. Oh wait, there she is.
Can
There's
you hear
Jen. We
me?
can see you,
Okay, great.
Jen. Yes.
Great. Thank you so much, Vince. Yes, hopefully let's add to that prayer that my internet stays stable so I can lead us all in a little bit of housekeeping. So as a community, we do come together every week and do a little bit of announcements and administrative stuff. So I'm going to share that with you today. So if you're newer with us, and you're not sure if we have your contact info, please fill out our online Connect card so we can connect with you one-on-one. Ed should be dropping that link in the chat right now. So thanks so much, Ed. You can also use that to let us know if you have a prayer request. And then you can also follow us on social media at Brown Line Church for updates on Sundays and other events or information. Or you can join our church's private Discord server, which is a great way to chat on Sundays, or drop messages and announcements throughout the week. I can also direct you to visit our website, brownlanechurch.org. That's a place you can find out what was that song, how to get connected to a small group, just learn more about us, or to fill out a financial time of need request. You can also find all of our messages. So if you missed a week, we archive everything via podcast format and YouTube. So it's super awesome if you're out on a walk and be like, hey, I missed the message a couple weeks ago, to be able to connect that way. And so I do want to share a brief financial update. Just a thank you to all of our donors and those of you who give to us, because we are a completely crowd-funded community. As we talk about all the time, we're not supported by any other larger organization or church body. And if you get something out of this community, and if you believe in our vision, we hope you consider giving as well. This is how our church, pays the pastors and pays our bills. So you can follow this QR code to give. And one of the best ways to do this is to do a recurring monthly donation to make that budget for yourself also, and then allows Brown Line to plan and know how much money we have coming in every month. So definitely a little bit of a softer January compared to a really strong November and December. So if you have room in your budget to give, or maybe bump up that recurring donation, it might be a great time to do that. So thank you so much to everybody who gives again. And just an announcement, we plan to be online and in person at the Davis next week for a hybrid service. So I'll see you there. Very excited to see you in person. And watch out for more info coming via email about in person, how we'll handle that. And we'll share that on social media, Discord, and all of that jazz. So with that, I will pass it back to Vince for communion. Hooray, my internet worked. I hope that was clear.
Thanks, Jen. It was. We totally heard you the whole way, which is awesome. Incredible that we had contribution to today's service that was moving. You were like moving through the air, and you look at that. She has an Amtrak coffee cup to prove it. So we're not just saying that to be cool. We actually had a moving contribution. I feel like, Jen, last week you were in Detroit, and this week you're like on an Amtrak. You're our reporter that goes out into the world, tells us what's going on. So thanks for that. All right. Well, let me close us with communion. We're imagining ourselves sharing the ceremonial meal that Jesus first shared with his closest friends, symbolized by a bread and a cup. Wesley's at the table too. All right. You want to sit down next to me? So I'll be honest, I'm actually in a different place than usual for most Sundays for communion this morning. Today's January 30th. For the last 2 decades, every January 30th, my twin sister and I receive a message from an old high school friend to mark my mother's yahrzeit. I wonder if anyone's ever heard the word yahrzeit before. It's a Yiddish word, and it is a word for the anniversary of a loved one's death. My friend who does this, who reaches out to my twin sister and I, is Jewish. And even though my sister and I are not in as much connection with her now 20 plus years later, her yearly message on this day, every year, is a reminder of how connected we were when my mom became sick and died, how closely our suffering touched her and still touches her. and we get a little chance to catch up, see what's happening in our lives. And my friend in this practice, deep in the Jewish tradition, which has a word for the anniversary of the death of a loved one. Why doesn't every tradition have a word for the anniversary of the death of a loved one? It's something we all experience. But this tradition, this practice has taught me so much about God. My friend has taught me so much about God. And I bring this up because a key part of what we have in view every Sunday when we take communion is our suffering, the things that we've experienced that are hard, the deaths that we've experienced that are hard. We repeat here often that Jesus' death on the cross, what communion invites us to consider, is not about satisfying the wrath of an angry God who needed someone to feel pain. That's a thing that humans do, and we project onto God. What Jesus on the cross is about is the God who joins human beings in pain, like my old high school friend does every January 30th, sending me a message. And so this is about the God who does that, who is not cold and distant and living in another realm untouched by pain. This is the God who lives in this realm touched by pain and is with us in deep solidarity when we experience pain. So if you're in pain this morning, you at least have me as company, because January 30th is a hard day for me every year. And I have found that there are friends who will join me in it. And I think that you will find the same. May we find that from God. We're going to pray. You can imagine yourself with a bread and cup as we're around the same proverbial table. Jesus, on the night when he was betrayed, he took bread. And when he had given thanks, he broke it and he said, "This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." And in the same way, he took a cup after supper, and he said, "This cup is my blood, which is for you. Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me." Jesus, your body, your blood, your suffering is for us because we are not alone in ours. And I pray that all of us may have an experience of that as it is needed. And for those of us in a place where we're on the other side of the spectrum, would we have eyes to see those close to us that need our presence now in their suffering? In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So good to be with you once again. And we hope to see you next week at the Davis Theater.
Happy birthday, Vince.
Hey, thanks, Ed.
It was Vince's birthday a couple days ago, everyone.
It was. Cat's out of the bag. Thanks, Ed.
I hope you had a wonderful week, Vince.
Thanks, Ed.